Well, friends, thank you for being on again. I have Dr. Robinson on, an expert in textual criticism and a Byzantine priority advocate, and we're going to address an objection that Dr. Dirk Youngkind, turn the book around, all right, and Dr. Youngkind has made against the Byzantine text. It's one that comes up quite a bit, and it's one of harmonization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, hopefully so everybody can kind of see his full quote. He's made an objection about harmonization, and he specifically ties in from Luke and Matthew. You can pause the screen if you want to read that whole thing. I have a summary here. I'm going to walk through it, then I'll ask Dr. Robinson if he'll respond to it. So just to here's the main points that are distilled from that dissection. The Byzantine text, in Luke 4:4, the Byzantine text adds, but by every word of God, which matches Matthew 4:4. And there's two possibilities here. One, it was accidentally omitted in other manuscripts. The other possibility is Luke was harmonizing, or rather that later scribes were harmonizing Luke and Matthew and added it in. And he touches Luke 4:5, something similar. The argument is that Matthew and Mark have been harmonized with the words, the devil took him up to a high mountain. And also in Luke 4:8, the Byzantine text begins with, go behind me, Satan, or get behind me, Satan. And so the idea here is that later scribes have harmonized Luke 4:8 to match up with Matthew 4:10. That's roughly the argument that he makes, and he says this is a pattern of the Byzantine text. There's this tendency to harmonize one gospel with another, and so I'll just let Dr. Robinson respond to that however he'd like. Sorry to break in here, but I am in the middle of editing this video and about to get it uploaded, and I realized that the most powerful defense that Dr. Robinson makes for the Byzantine text is towards the end of the video, where he turns the Alexandrian argument on its head, and you really just have to see it. So I know this is an age of short attention spans, but we're looking for some people today who are willing to dig deep. So stick with us, and I think you'll find towards the end of this video that you'll hear a powerful defense for the Byzantine text.
Well, there's no question that among some scribes, there's going to be a tendency to harmonize. And we see this in manuscripts all the time. The problem that comes up is if it's one or two or just a small handful of manuscripts that happen to be harmonizing, I can attribute that to a scribal proclivity of those particular scribes. But when it affects the entire body of Byzantine manuscripts, which it does in these cases you mentioned, then it's more than just a simple harmonization that's caused by the aberrance of scribes or the intentionality of scribes, like we see in numerous other harmonizations. This is something that's already in the bulk of the manuscripts, and if it were not originally in the text, let's assume any one of those expansions were not in the original text of Luke, then the question comes, as soon as some scribes started harmonizing and putting these extra words in to make it agree with Matthew, then why didn't the rest of the Byzantine scribes say, wait a minute, you're corrupting the text by doing so, and you need to take that out, but we're not going to put it in. And they are not simply accepting like sheep that, oh, you put it in, it agrees with Matthew, so we like it, so we're going to keep it. If that were the case, then what do you do with all the other places where a group, a handful of Byzantine-type scribes might add a word here or add a word there that harmonizes with either Matthew or Mark or even sometimes with John, because we have examples of all of these. And why do we not say all of the other Byzantines, oh, this harmonized, why don't we accept all of that? And then in contrast, we have the opposite case going on, that if you are looking at the critical text manuscripts, which are predominantly Alexandrian, they harmonize too. And there are many cases where the Alexandrian reading is harmonizing with another gospel, but the Byzantine is the one that has the differing text. Are they under the same condemnation or not? And obviously, the critical text advocates do not say they're under the same condemnation. They're okay, and their harmonization isn't really harmonization, but it's what the scribe, original writer of the gospel, happened to write. And it was the Byzantines that, for whatever reason, chose to depart. Well, if the Byzantines have a tendency to harmonize, then what made them have a tendency to depart? So in other words, the knife can cut both ways on this. And it's just as likely that a Byzantine scribe, could harmonize as an Alexandrian scribe. But for the most part, as we see among the Alexandrian manuscripts, they tend, for the greater part, not to harmonize, but to retain their own, if you want to call it, Alexandrian style integrity, whereas most of the Byzantines are not doing this widespread minor type harmonization that other scribes of that Byzantine type are doing, but they maintain their integrity. Now, if we look at those actual cases you brought up in Luke 4:4, where it says, man will not live but by every word of God, that's the Byzantine reading. The omission of that phrase is by only, in the Nestle 27 edition, which I use because it has what I consider a more comprehensive hand apparatus. The Nestle 27 edition cites only 5 manuscripts that actually leave out that phrase. There's only 5. And out of those 5, only 3 of those are what would be considered early, and that would be Sinaiticus, Vaticanus, and Washingtonianus. It's very possible that a common ancestor may have just left out perhaps a line, because the amount of text left out was only 20 letters. That could easily have been one line within a column that maybe the scribe's eye skipped a line. You don't have to look for the same beginning or ending of letters, which would be homoarcton, homoteleuton, or something like that. An eye could just jump from one line to another, and you could leave out the 20 letters. That's one possibility. Such things, he says, Dirk Janken says, such things happen. And when they happen early enough in the tradition, it's possible that the variant becomes widespread. Well, if they happen early enough in the tradition, it's possible that produces the critical text reading. It doesn't have to go the other way. Like I said, the knife can cut both ways. If you go to the other reading in Luke 4:5, where we had the devil takes him into a high mountain, well, it sounds like a repeat of the same one that we just had previously. That omission of the phrase, the devil taking him into a high mountain, is only in 4 named manuscripts in the Nestle 27 edition. And the earliest of those are only Aleph and B, Sinaiticus and Vaticanus. They don't even get Washingtonianus on that one. And again, could that one have been a drop because of dropping a line for no reason? It could be, but even Dirk Janken admits that it could be that that phrase is original, this is his own words, and that the words were dropped accidentally, and this would be because of a jump from the ending on in the word auton to the ending on in the word hupsalon, so that it could have been dropped just from, this would be a case of homoteleuton, skipping from one word to another, a well-known phenomena known as a scribal leap. When you get to the third one, you have in Luke 4:8 the same thing happening again, where Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan," in the Byzantine text, but the Alexandrian type text, the critical text, leaves out those words, which do appear in Matthew, granted, but again, the difference here is the Nestle-Aland text actually cites 15 known manuscripts that have that, most of these being of Alexandrian type variety. But when you look at only the earliest ones, it's going to be Aleph, B, and W, plus the Western manuscript, Codex Bezae, D. And this one could also have been a matter of a line skippage, because again, these are just short readings. You have this one is Hupage opisomu satana, and it would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 letters. We're dropping 20 letters here. You're dropping 20 letters in the first one, and about the same in the second one. I'm not going to count that one, but you're dropping almost the same equivalent length of lines, and it looks more like, if it's not accidental omission on the part of the Alexandrian manuscripts, it may be, it's possible, intentional, actually revision, saying we don't need to say this because Matthew's already said it. Maybe it's that. We just don't know, and you can't second guess what's going on in a scribe's mind of either a Byzantine type or of the Alexandrian or of the Western type. All we know is what they wrote.
Yeah, no, that's really good. That's fascinating. So, and just to be clear and reiterate one of the points that you made there are times where you'll see the same sort of thing happen in the critical text when it doesn't happen in the Byzantine text. Am I understanding what you said
Yeah,
correctly there?
no, yeah, there are places in the critical text where the critical text reading harmonizes with another gospel, and the Byzantine has a totally different reading. And that would be quite common. And one example that you can have is, I'm getting my Greek New Testament here, the Nestle edition. Over in Matthew 27:49, this is one well-known example. But in Matthew 27:49, you have a harmonization in the Alexandrian type manuscripts to the Gospel of John. And it says, reading, you have to look at the apparatus to the Nestle edition, because even they knew better than to put this one in their own text. And it said, Jesus on the cross, and the rest said, leave him alone. Let's see if Elijah will come to save him. And then the Alexandrian manuscripts continue with a harmonization with John 19:34. But another, having taken the spear, pierced his side, and out came water and blood. And the only trouble is the positioning of that at Matthew 27:49 actually means the spear thrust into the side is what killed Jesus, not that he just gave up the spirit as it's otherwise said he would have done. And it then actually contradicts what's over in John. But what manuscripts actually support that? From what they show here, Aleph, B, C are the earliest ones, and then they have other L and Gamma, and then a few others that are stated. The few others happen to be among the minuscules, so even some later Byzantine minuscules thought this was pretty good, and they put it in. But the earliest manuscripts that have that harmonization are, again, Aleph and B, part of the same group of culprits, round up the usual suspects, and then C, which also tends to fluctuate between Alexandrian and Byzantine readings quite a bit. So that's just one example. There are others that could be easily given. I just have to go through the apparatus and set up a list of those. But it's not that this is just a Byzantine-only phenomena. It's an Alexandrian phenomena and it's a Western phenomena.
And what's interesting about that to me is that that harmonization that you just showed, which is a clear corruption, and I don't think anybody wants to disagree with that. It's a clear corruption.
Mhm.
The Byzantine scribes weren't just wholesale naive and just say, "Oh, okay, now we're going to switch all the manuscripts to read this way," which is kind of what you have to believe on the other side of this for Matthew and Luke, that, they just decided to just accept the harmonization. What you have instead is a small stream of manuscripts that accept this harmonization, while the vast bulk of manuscripts have remained pure.
Well, that's exactly what happened there. And just by analogy, then why, when the Alexandrians over there in the Luke passages, when they're omitting these short 20-word segments, why is it that they suddenly have more authority than the vast bulk of what took place in transmission? And why might they not have omitted by either accident or maybe, as I said, possibly by intent, saying, oh, this is already covered in Matthew. We don't need to say it again. They could
But
have gone that way.
Well, I think one of the beauties of the Byzantine text is there's a lot of emphasis on external evidence, because some of this stuff, very intelligent men can come up with very intelligent reasons why they think a scribe did something, or psychoanalyze someone who they don't know, who lived 1,500 years ago, and try to tell them why they put it in the text. But when you have theory that is very much dependent on the external evidence, I think it takes a lot of subjectivity out of this. Is that a fair?
Well, when Wilbur Pickering wrote his Identity of the New Testament Text, he pointed out what others were not willing to openly say, but that internal evidence can be used like a nose of wax, and it can be twisted so that when you want to support one reading, you can say, oh, this is a typical Byzantine omission. And you want to support another reading, this is a typical Byzantine addition, because they're trying, Metzger, say in his textual commentary, is defending specifically the Nestle-Aland text. But the contradictions come even within Metzger's own commentary, because let's say we were saying the phrase his disciples, hoi mathetai autou, and Metzger will say in some places, if the Byzantine reading has autou, he'll say it's a typical Byzantine expansion. And yet, if it's the Alexandrian manuscripts that say autou, then he'll say the Byzantine text either accidentally omitted it or deliberately edited it out. And again, they arrive at contradictory positions where this one goes that way and this one goes that way. And the same internal argument can be used in multiple ways, which then raises the issue of subjectivity. Where, on the other hand, if you have a theory that is externally based, then you are dealing with objectivity, because the manuscripts either say something or they don't. And the only issue is the theory that accounts for what is in the manuscripts. Is the theory a better theory, trying to account for the rise and dominance of the Byzantine text, as I and Pierpont and others have promoted? Or is the theory better, as those favoring the Alexandrian critical text have promoted, which goes back to what we were talking about, either the recensional theory or the so-called process theory, and which one is more likely to have occurred? And for that, you think Occam's razor, which one has the least amount of requirements of a more convoluted system to account for all the data that we already possess on external grounds?
Yeah, no, it's very good. Well, I really appreciate your input on this, Dr. Robinson, as always. I thought that was a great answer, and I'll be looking forward to talking to you again at some point.
Okay, glad to do it.